2005. I base that or compare that to other companies of similar size and my knowledge of what Arbor was doing, even way back when it was just a standalone net flow analysis and DDoS defense company before they acquired Eloquia, which was a pretty big chunk for them to bite off. And I estimate that their annual revenue is around $80 million run rate today. And the environment we're in, a company like Tektronix, I don't think is going to spend huge multiples on companies like Arbor, but there was a really good fit. There is large overlap in the customer base, but that's good. The overlap that didn't exist so much is that Tektronix can now take Arbor's technology for discovering, basically doing a network traffic analysis and helping to block misuse of networks, which is particularly important in cellular networks. So landline networks, they've got all this fiber in the world available to them, and they tend to be slow to respond to spam and phishing attacks, and botnets, and DDoS attacks because they've got enough bandwidth to absorb it. Cellular phone networks, not so much, especially at the head ends where they're very, very concerned with the investments they have in cellular towers everywhere. So I estimate that the valuation Tektronix paid for Arbor was about 2.5 times forward-looking 12-month revenue, which puts it right at $200 million. So a big investment and a big acquisition in this space, one I believe is well-deserved for the founders and employees and all the people who have been working for 10 years on Arbor networks. I think Arbor's existing customer base will be well served because obviously Tektronix is a bigger company and is backed by a much bigger company. So definitely Arbor is a survivor in the technology space, and no worries there, unlike some of the other NetFlow companies that have had acquisitions that were less than stellar. So I think Arbor's customers will be well served by this acquisition. I think Arbor Networks itself is going to thrive under this new regime. They'll have the ability to continue their expansion. Interviews with Rob Allen, who's one of the founders over at Arbor. He expects to continuing their hiring both in Ann Arbor, where their engineering and technology resides, as well as Boston, where the headquarters is. And then what this means for Tektronix's customers is more access to security. I was heartened by a presentation that Tektronix sent me, of which this is a slide, but one of their key points was that Arbor was going to be their beachhead in security. And this is a theme that I've harped on for going on a decade now, and that regardless of where you think the security space and the brand awareness tied to security is today, because the threats are the one element that are constantly changing and growing, whereas, you can predict where bandwidth is going, you can predict where computer power is going, following Moore's laws in both cases, but I think there's a similar growth ramp in threats and investment needed to counter them. So as we go through that, each company in each field is going to have a greater and greater driver towards using security as a way to brand themselves. And if, it goes from a bank that has to establish trust with its clients and therefore demonstrate that they take security seriously, to a vendor. And we saw Microsoft look like it was going to crumble under the lack of security associated with their products just 5 years ago, making a massive investment in an attempt to do better practice. You have better practices in coding, and they seemed to hire, every available security expert there was and put them on the road, talking at conferences, and tried to build up this perception of being more secure, or at least concerned about security and knowing what they're talking about when it comes to security. And I've been pushing the network vendors that, create routers and switches to make security acquisitions over the years. And I remember when Tipping Point was acquired by 3Com going, yay, I was right. But evidently in that case, I wasn't quite right because 3Com didn't really know what they acquired. I'm hoping, and I think it's evident now, that HP is very cognizant of what they acquired when they acquired 3Com Tipping Point, and are going to, take that plus the HVC acquisition and have a very robust, strong security offering. So now you'll start to think of HP not only as, the network and data center and printer and laptop provider, but as a security provider. And I think just the wording that Tektronix used in their announcement, that they're heading the same way. So now they're going to have, they've just added to their offerings, so they do development work, they work with the engineers that rely on networking equipment. They've got troubleshooting products that they sell to those companies. They support the monitoring of networks for quality of service, similar to the DPAC inspection capabilities that Arbor had with their Alacoya, but much more towards the wireless world and the wired. Now they get to add security, so give the same customers the visibility into what's going on their networks from a security perspective. So exciting times in the security space. This acquisition caught me by surprise. I've been expecting and predicting that defense contractors will be making security acquisitions just so they can build the case that they're cybersecurity experts. And you can do that with your own internal people, and obviously the Boeings and Northrop Grummans of the world have huge cybersecurity expertise, but they don't have brands associated with it. And if they made an acquisition of, even a huge existing security company, the McAfee, Symantec, what have you of the world, they could align their brands with security by making those acquisitions, which on top of the revenue gains and the product gains might be enough to push them into making those big investments. That wrapped up the week's events. Next week's event is 3 p.m. Eastern, so I'm going to move it back to the original time of 3 p.m. I'm going to be playing with the time for a while until I figure out what's most convenient for everybody who wants to sit in live. Of course, all of these are recorded. They'll be here on Bright Talk forever, so feel free to send links around, and feel free to come back if you can't make the scheduled times and listen to the recording. And you can just go to cyberwarfare.eventbrite.com to find that. And as always, keep track of me on threatchaos.com and at Twitter. My industry news comes through the CyberWar ID. If you want to link into me, feel free to do so. Just use my email, richard@it-harvest.com, or contact me directly if you got any questions and things you think should be included in the next Cyber Defense Weekly webcast.